Action!
Imagine being 9 years old. Your father is dead. Your tribe has abandoned you. Your family is left on the open steppe with no horses, no food, and no protection, just the howling wind and the coming winter. Most children in that situation would not survive the season. He did. And then he came back not just to survive, but to conquer, to build the largest land empire in human history, to make kings beg and cities fall silent at the mere sound of his name. He started with nothing and ended with everything. This is the story of Temujin, the boy the world would come to know as Genghis Khan, and it is one of the most extraordinary and most brutal lives ever lived. His early life was nothing but survival. He was born around 1162 on the banks of the Anan River in what is now northern Mongolia, the steppe, endless, wind-stripped, and merciless, a landscape where weakness is not a disadvantage, it is a death sentence. His father was Yesuje, a minor chieftain, not powerful, not wealthy, but respected enough that when Temujin entered the world, the shamans took notice. Legend says he came clutching a blood clot in his fist, a sign they believed of a great warrior to come. For a few years, life was difficult but stable. The steppe was always hard, but the family had horses and allies and a future. Then his father was poisoned by rivals on a routine journey. Temujin was 9 years old. What happened next tells you everything you need to know about the world he had been born into. His clan, the people his father had led and protected, looked at this widow and her young children and made a calculation. They abandoned them, stripped away their livestock, pulled their support and disappeared. They were left with nothing. A mother, several small children, the approaching Mongolian winter. They survived on roots and berries and whatever small animals they could trap. This was not hardship in any ordinary sense. This was a daily negotiation with death. And through every frozen morning and every desperate meal, something was forming in Temujin, not just the will to survive, but a cold, patient fury at a world that had decided he did not matter. But the world was not finished with him yet. A rival clan captured him, a boy they saw as a future threat, the fatherless son of a former chieftain, and locked him in a wooden yoke that immobilized his neck and arms. He was displayed as a prisoner, a symbol, a warning to anyone who might rally around him. He escaped. The details are murky across historical sources, but escape he did, moving through rivers, traveling at night, relying on the mercy of strangers who saw something in this hunted boy and chose to help him. He made it back. And here is the thing about Temujin that sets him apart from the very beginning. Where another person might have learned defeat, he learned something else entirely. He learned the system. He learned who held power, how it was maintained, and crucially, where it was fragile. And he began quietly and methodically to build his own. His first step to power, he went to claim his betrothed. Board had been promised to him in childhood, an arrangement his father had made before his death. Her family honored it. And in that one act, Temujin gained something more valuable than a wife. He gained an alliance, a connection, a thread of belonging in a world that had offered him nothing but isolation. It did not last. The Merkits, a tribe with an old grudge against his father, raided his camp and took Bort. It was an act of revenge for a grievance that Temujin had nothing to do with. He had simply been born into the wrong bloodline. A lesser man might have accepted the loss. The odds were against him. He had almost nothing. Temujin called in every favor he possessed. He went to his childhood friend Jamaka. He sought out Togrul, a powerful chieftain who had once been allied with his father. He built a coalition, careful, deliberate, patient, and then he struck. He recovered Bort, but something more important happened in that campaign than the rescue of one woman. Temujin discovered what power actually looked like when you built it yourself, not inherited power. Not power handed down through bloodlines and clan hierarchy. Power earned through loyalty, through keeping your word, through treating those who served you with a fairness that was genuinely rare on the Mongolian steppe. And so he made a decision that was, for its time, close to revolutionary. He began promoting people based on merit, not their family name, not their clan, not their bloodline, their ability, their loyalty, their results. A man of low birth who proved himself could rise. A man of noble birth who betrayed his trust would fall and fall hard. The message was consistent and it spread quickly. Temujin was different. Temujin kept his word. People began to follow him, not because tribal custom demanded it, because they chose to. Even his old friend Jamaka grew uneasy. Jamaka represented the old order, aristocratic, traditional, built on the assumption that lineage determined destiny. And Temujin was quietly dismantling that assumption with every passing season. They went to war with each other. It was not fast. It stretched across years, through shifting alliances and bitter battles. And through all of it, something remarkable happened. Even when Temujin lost, he kept growing. Soldiers who fought against him and were captured often chose to join him, because his treatment of those who submitted was fair and the alternative was declining. He lost battles. He never seemed to lose momentum. If you're following this story, go ahead and subscribe. We cover history's most extraordinary lives, and there is much more to come. This is the making of Genghis Khan. The wars were brutal and they were long. Tribes clashed. Alliances collapsed. Old friends became mortal enemies. The steppe was a chessboard and Temujin played it with a patience and a strategic clarity that his rivals could not match. He destroyed the Tatars, the tribe that had poisoned his father, methodically and completely. He broke the Merkits. He outmaneuvered Jamaka at every turn until Jamaka, isolated and betrayed by his own followers, was finally brought before him. Temujin executed him. But he did it by the accounts we have, with a certain respect, granting a death without bloodshed, which was considered an honor in Mongolian culture. Even in his final act toward his old friend, there was calculation. There was meaning. Nothing Temujin did was accidental. One by one, the tribes of Mongolia came under his shadow, some through force, many through a calculation they made themselves, that joining this man was simply better than dying against him. And then came 1206 on the banks of the Anan River, the same river where he had been born. A great assembly was called. The Kurultai. Every tribe of Mongolia gathered together for the first time in living memory, and they gave Temujin a new name, Genghis Khan. Universal ruler, oceanic ruler, ruler of all. He was somewhere between 40 and 50 years old. It had taken him decades of suffering, strategy, and sheer refusal to accept the fate the world had assigned him. But the boy who had been abandoned on the steppe, locked in a wooden yoke, hunted across frozen plains, and now sat at the center of a unified Mongolia. The world, though it did not know it yet, was about to change. How he actually conquered. Genghis Khan is remembered for conquest. What history often glosses over is how, the actual mechanics of how one man, from one of the most resource-poor regions on Earth, managed to bring down empires that had stood for centuries. It begins with the horse. Mongol cavalry were not simply soldiers who rode horses. They were people who had been born on horseback, who had grown up inseparable from their animals, who could ride for days without rest, eat from horseback, and fire a composite bow with devastating accuracy at full gallop. They were not cavalry in the way the settled world understood cavalry. They were something the settled world had no real category for. Speed was the Mongol superpower. While the armies of China, Persia, and Eastern Europe were large and organized, and crucially slow, Mongol forces could cover ground that seemed impossible. They could appear before a defense could be organized and vanish before a counterattack could be mounted. They did not fight like conventional armies. They moved like weather. But speed alone does not explain it. Genghis Khan invested heavily in what we would today call intelligence. Before any major campaign, his forces gathered detailed information through merchants, spies, and scouts, enemy strength, terrain, internal political tensions, supply lines. He rarely fought with incomplete information. He understood that knowing the battlefield before you arrived was an advantage that could decide the outcome before a sword was drawn. He also built one of the first long-distance communication systems in history, a network of relay riders that could carry messages across hundreds of miles with extraordinary speed. He could coordinate armies that were separated by vast distances. No medieval European commander could dream of anything comparable. And then there was the psychological dimension. The Mongols were sophisticated and deliberate in their use of terror. Cities that surrendered quickly were treated with relative leniency. Cities that resisted were annihilated. This was not cruelty for its own sake. It was policy. calibrated, consistent, and effective. Refugees fleeing destroyed cities became unwitting messengers, carrying stories of total destruction into the next city on the Mongol path. By the time the army arrived at a city's gates, the battle was often already half won. Stick around for the next part, on more on the conquest on Genghis Khan. And please do not forget to subscribe, like and comment your thought on this history's conqueror and the events surrounding his conquest. And tell us what story you'll like to see next. Turn on notifications for our next video. Thank you for watching.